Hey bookworms, it's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with the mid-year check-in tag. I know a lot of people do the mid-year book freakout tag, but this is a tag that was created by Harriet Rosie a couple of years ago. I did it last year. I really liked it. I tend to prefer these questions over the questions in the mid-year book freakout tag, so that's why I'm choosing to do this one instead. I will link Harriet Rosie's video from last year down in the description box in case you want to check it out. I think this will be pretty short and sweet. There's only 10 questions. Sort of 9. The 10th question is to tag people. And I don't actually plan on tagging anybody because I know we're a little bit late in the year, but if anyone wants to do this tag, obviously you're welcome to. Okay, so the first question is, how many books have you read so far this year? And I'm going to answer this question as of like the end of June and not include anything that I've read in July because the end of June is technically the mid-year. So at the end of June, I had read 24 books and DNF'd 2 books. And I think at that time that was still putting me about 2 books behind my Goodreads goal of 52 books. Or actually, I changed my Goodreads goal not that long ago because I had read some novellas and I wanted to kind of like equal it out. So I think my goal is actually 57 books now. So I'm not entirely sure how many books behind that put me, but I was a little bit behind my Goodreads goal. I know that. I had been ahead of my goals by like 2 or 3 books for a little while, but June was a terrible reading month and I didn't actually finish anything. I just DNF'd 1 book in June. That's why I haven't posted a June wrap-up. I actually won't be posting a June wrap-up. I'm just going to wait till the end of July. I mean, we're almost at the end of July now anyways, and I'm going to include my June DNF in a wrap-up for both June and July. So heads up about that, no June wrap-up coming, but I will mention the book that I DNF'd in my July wrap-up. The next question is, what's your favorite book so far this year? I had to think about this a little bit. I looked back at the books that I had read in January and February to see if I enjoyed any of those any more than the books that I read in the spring. I just posted my spring wrap-up where I talk about my top 5 favorite books that I read in the spring. And it turns out that nothing I read in January or February was really that much better for me than the books that I read in the spring. So my favorite book so far this year has been Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb, which is a nonfiction memoir about Lori Gottlieb's life. I was definitely not expecting this book to be such a favorite, but I just really enjoyed it when I read it. And it wasn't just that I enjoyed it and found it interesting, but it was really thought-provoking and I feel like I learned a lot from it. And it was just a really memorable reading experience. It's definitely a book that I would like to revisit in the future because I think it's one of those books where each time you read it, you can pick out things that are more like salient for your current life. And as you grow and change, I think you could reread that and get different messages and meanings out of that book. I loved it so much and it meant a lot to me, and that's why it was my favorite thing that I've read so far this year. But I do want to give another answer because that's not my typical genre of choice. The thing is the next few books on my like tiered list are really close together. But these are the next 3 favorite books that I have read so far this year. I talked about all of them in my last video about my top 5 spring reads, so definitely go check that out if you want more thoughts. My second favorite book from this year was probably Scythe, even though these 3 are all really close together. I do think that the order that I talked about these in that video still holds. Next question is, what's your most disappointing read of the year? And I have had quite a few things that I found a little disappointing for one reason or another so far this year. These are actually all of the books that disappointed me in some way this year, but definitely out of these, the one that has been the most disappointing was This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El-Motar. I had really high hopes for this one because I had seen it on a few favorites lists from 2019 and it had kind of like come out of nowhere. I hadn't heard people talking about it, and then all of a sudden when I was watching best of the year lists, I saw a couple people mention it and it sounded really good. The plot is sort of about these 2 time traveling, I don't know, spies that fall in love and send each other like love letters and stuff. But the thing is that it was very like literary fiction leaning and a lot of the story was told in a very abstract way to where I didn't understand what was like literally happening because the writing was so figurative. And I really don't enjoy those kinds of books because the whole time I was reading it, which it is a novella, so it's not super long, but the whole time I was reading it, I was just so confused and constantly trying to figure out what was happening. And that was so distracting that I couldn't enjoy my time reading the story. So I was very disappointed about that book. I really thought I was gonna like it, and I didn't. And it was very sad. The next question is, what genre have you read most this year? So I had to update my reading spreadsheet because I was a couple months behind to figure this one out. And honestly, I'm a little surprised, but then looking back on what I read, I wasn't. The genre that I've read the most so far this year has been science fiction. I've read 11 books that I would classify as some sort of science fiction. And I've only read 6 fantasy books. They were all high fantasy, but I've only read 6 of them. And at first I was very surprised by this because fantasy is my favorite. And while I enjoy sci-fi, I really haven't traditionally read a ton of it. But obviously that changed this year. Looking back on it, part of that was that in the beginning of the year, I was very much in a sci-fi mood because I had been reading the Expanse series and I was just in the mood for sci-fi and I was putting more of it on my TBR. But then came the BookTube SFF reading that I needed to do as a judge, and a lot of those books were science fiction. I mean, I was judging the science fiction category, but even out of the novellas and the YA category, there were a number of science fiction books. All of the novellas were science fiction. So all of that put together, it makes sense that I have read mostly science fiction for this first half of the year, but it was definitely a little bit of a surprise because it's not my favorite genre, even though I do enjoy it. After being in such a sci-fi mood for the first half of the year, I do feel myself craving more fantasy, so I think this is going to even out over the rest of the year. Next question is, name a new favorite author that you have discovered this year. I think that the one that I enjoyed the most was Neal Shusterman because I really loved Scythe. Like I said, it was my second favorite book that I've read this year, and I'm really excited to continue on in the series and see what he does with it. I've heard a lot about Neal Shusterman over the years, about his books, and I've been wanting to give them a try for a while, so I'm really glad that I finally got my button gear and I read Scythe. I've also seen Neal Shusterman speak a couple of times. I went to a book festival on the West Coast in Santa Monica for a couple of years, and he, I think, is maybe local to the area because he was there both years. And he is a really cool guy. I really enjoyed hearing him speak on panels too, so I'm very excited to dive into more of his stuff. And I've just heard such good things about the rest of this trilogy, and I love the first one so much, so I'm very excited to have newly discovered him officially. Next question is, what's the most surprisingly good book you've read so far this year? This one took a little bit of thinking, but the answer I came down to was The Cruel Prince and The Wicked King by Holly Black, which I read both of those as part of the BookTube SFF Awards. Part of me is not too surprised that I enjoyed them because one, obviously they're really hyped, and also I've read a couple of Holly Black's books before and enjoyed them, so it wasn't like completely crazy that I would like them, but I was really on the fence about the series before because of the enemies to lovers trope, and that just often doesn't work for me, and the way that people talk about the romance and the male love interest, Carden, in the series, I just didn't think that I would like him or the relationship. It just didn't sound like something I would enjoy reading. I can't explain why I do actually like this enemies to lovers trope in this series and not in a lot of other series, but somehow the way that Holly Black wrote it just works for me, and I surprisingly really enjoyed these books. I definitely was thinking that they were probably overhyped and that I wouldn't like their relationship just from the way that I had heard it described, so I was a little surprised when I actually really enjoyed it, especially the second book, and I can't wait to read the third one and find out how it all ends. Next question is, what are your favorite and most anticipated 2020 releases? So my favorite 2020 release that I've read so far, I looked through my list and it looks like I've read 5 2020 releases, and not all of them were hits. Out of this list, the one that was my favorite And I think maybe the only one that I've given 5 stars was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This is an adult mystery thriller that I read recently and thoroughly enjoyed. It was my second Riley Sager book. I talk about this, well, in multiple videos, but most recently in my top 5 spring reads video. But just the plot of the story was so fun to read and entertaining, and I really enjoy Riley Sager's writing style and the characters he creates, and I had a total blast reading this book, and so it was definitely my favorite 2020 release that I have read so far this year. As far as 2020 releases still to come, I think one that is really obvious to me, especially now that I have started reading / rereading The Way of Kings, is I'm super excited about Rhythm of War that's coming out this fall. I am currently participating in a read-along of the series. We're almost done with the first book, and we're going to be picking up one book every 2 months until Rhythm of War comes out, and I'm super excited about being caught up on the series when the new one comes. The other book that I'm pretty excited about is actually Victoria Schwab's newest book, or V.E. Schwab. She is releasing a book that she's been teasing and talking about, I feel like, for a really long time, called The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I've seen a few early reviews of it, and they, of course, are good, and so I'm really excited about it. I have read multiple of V.E. Schwab's books. Some I love, some I thought were just okay, so really don't know where I'm going to fall on this one, but I'm very interested to see what other people are going to think of it, and I think regardless of what other people think, I'm going to want to give it a shot myself. The next question is, what's your next big priority for your reading? And this is a tough question. With the way 2020 has been going, my goals that I set at the beginning of the year, I feel like have just kind of gone out the window. I'm becoming more of a mood reader than I was before, or I'm giving into my mood more than I did before. I think because I have been, struggling with my mental health for a couple of months, and just life has not been great for a little while. So kind of throwing my reading plans out the window and just reading whatever has been working for me a lot better. Obviously, I still made a TBR for the summer, even though it was gigantic, and I'm still trying to stick to those things, but I'm just giving myself a lot more grace, especially when it comes to my series goals. I have been starting series left and right and just not really caring about finishing, and just trying to read what I want to read, even if it's a new series. Speaking of series, I guess I would say that my biggest priority coming up for my reading is to focus on the Stormlight Archives. I want to make sure I stay on track with this read-along, which honestly I don't think will be hard. I know I got really behind at the beginning of the read-along, but that was because of things that I had going on in June. But now I'm caught up, and I'm so hooked into the story that I don't see myself really getting behind in the future. But I mean, knock on wood, who knows what's going to happen. So that is a priority for me, is staying on top of that read along, trying to make those live shows so I can discuss things that have happened and what I think is going to happen with others, because that is my favorite part about reading things together. And I also want to make videos, Stormlight Archive videos, so let me know down in the comment section if you guys have ideas for different Stormlight related videos. I think I'm going to do a spoiler-free review for The Way of Kings, but not a spoilery video for that one. But I might do spoilery videos for the other books. I don't know. I haven't really figured it out, and I've been struggling to film lately, so I'm not going to promise anything. But let me know if you have any ideas down in the comment section. And then question number 9 is, what's been your bookish highlight of the year so far? And honestly, answering this question makes me sad, because if 2020 had gone as planned, I would have 1 or 2 things to talk about here, but those things did not happen. I don't know if I've even mentioned this in a video, but I was supposed to go to JordanCon. I got approved for a media pass, and I was planning to go. Obviously, JordanCon was canceled, and that didn't happen. So that's sad. And also, I was really looking forward to going to BookNet Fest this year. I was tentatively possibly going to be a speaker, and I was really excited about that, but BookNet Fest is also not happening, at least not in person this year. So that makes me sad. Those are the 2 things that I feel like I could have talked about for this question. I mean, I did talk about them anyways, but they didn't pan out. So looking at the way things have gone and trying to figure out what my bookish highlight is. At the moment, I feel like it's the Stormlight Archives read-along. I really enjoy reading these like big complex series with other people and discussing them. That's why I hosted the Wheel of Time read-along a while ago. At this point, it's been a couple years, which is kind of crazy since that started. But I just like reading things as a community, especially things like Stormlight Archives, where there's a lot of like foreshadowing and like theories that people can have and discussions you can have. I just think it's a lot of fun. So I'm really looking forward to continuing on with the read along and the conversations that we'll have and just getting caught up on the series, because I have read the first book, The Way of Kings, but it was like 10 years ago, and I don't remember if I've read the second one. So I think I'll figure it out once I read the second one and see if I get a lot of like deja vu moments, but that may or may not be a reread for me. So I'm excited to like continue on in the series and just see what the fuss is about, which maybe I shouldn't put it that way because I know what the fuss is about. I've read enough of Sanderson to know that I would really enjoy this. But yeah, it just feels good to be like in with everybody else reading it, you know? So I'm gonna pick that as my bookish highlight. I will leave the playlist for the read along down in the description box so you guys can check it out if you want. And then the last question is, who do you tag? Like I said, I'm not gonna tag anybody in particular because a lot of people have already done their mid-year tag, whether or not it was this one or a different one. But if you haven't done one yet and you liked these questions, like I like these questions, then feel free to do it. You can say that I tagged you. Just go for it. All right, guys, so that is my mid-year check-in tag. I hope you liked this video. Let me know down in the comment section what you thought of some of my answers to these questions, or let me know what your favorite book that you've read so far this year is. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content. That's all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye.